You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of Ask Drone U. My name is Paul, and I have the pleasure of having Jason from Motherboard with us today. Hey Jason, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. I've loved your articles from the very beginning. And I'm not sure if you remember working with me in the past during the Pittsburgh Marathon incident in early 2014. But I remember working with you. Anyway,
I do remember it for the record. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
yeah, that was
cool.
a good story.
Thanks, man. You have written, I would say, some of the best stories in the industry, and recently this week you had two that came out. One, the FAA gave us a list of every drone pilot who had ever been fined, and then kind of a follow-up to that, which was the FAA has never fined anyone for flying a drone commercially. So tell us, run us through the article. I've got some questions for you, but I love the fact that you use the Freedom of Information Act to actually figure out all of this information, which has actually validated a lot of the things that we have been saying for quite some time. But tell us how you got into this, what you figured out, what surprised you. This was honestly an amazing article to read.
Right. So I've been covering drones and drone regulations for like 3 or 4 years now. And one thing I've learned is that the FAA can't really be trusted when it says things. As you know, they've changed the guidelines a few different times. They've argued various crazy things in court. They have sort of tried to use regulations for manned aircraft for drones, things like that. So anyways, back in October, I think his name's Michael Whitaker. He's an administrator at the FAA, went in front of Congress and basically said, hey, we have done 20 enforcement actions against drone users. And when I heard that, only, a handful had come out before. There was obviously the Rafael Perker case was huge. That was right after the Skypan $1.9 million fine had been announced. And they did that right before this hearing. So it's kind of like, hey, the congressional hearing was like, hey, FAA, what are you doing to keep us safe? And they said, we're fining people who are flying unsafely, basically. And so I heard that and I said, okay, well, we've only seen a handful of these. We should be able to see all of them because, technically these are all supposed to be public. And so I filed the Freedom of Information Act request asking for all of the enforcement actions it had ever taken against anyone who flew drones. 8 months later, I got something back. This was like last week. I got something back, and it took a while. And something I learned is that the FAA is very disorganized, which probably isn't too surprising for people who have been following them lately. I had to call a few different times and said, hey, where is this? Because presumably you have a high-level official going in front of Congress saying, we find 20 people. Surely they have a list of that somewhere. It shouldn't take that long for them to come back with it. But basically, basically they have all these different regional safety offices, and they all have different databases, and they can't do a simple query for them. So anyways, that's
wow.
It's pretty crazy and ridiculous, and they're reforming the entire thing right now. I think it just kind of got lost in the shuffle, but basically it took a very long time to get these back. Finally got them back. It's like 220 pages or so of documents, letters sent to, the drone operators. I'm scrolling through them and I see that all of them are for reckless flight. I forget the exact regulations, like 9113A or 14A or something. But it's the one that they used for every single fine, and it's basically reckless or careless flight. And not a single one of these was for not having a 333 or operating commercially without a 333.
Which is extremely interesting, but one of the things that you said in your article, and I love, we have actually been saying it to other people as well, is, if you want to see the guidance that the FAA has been giving out to their enforcement officers, where is it? You're looking for a form, it was like 2150B, change 6 or something, where essentially it says, we're only focused on the safety. And I find that really interesting because, why wouldn't they go after people for flying drones commercially when they're harping all the time, oh, it's illegal to fly a drone and make money unless you have an exemption, yet the bar has been set so high for the exemption. It's a little ridiculous, and I love what Loretta Alkay said in here. She said, Loretta, who was in charge of the FAA's legal operations for the Eastern region of more than 20 years, told me that the documents I showed her, the 200 and such pages you were talking about, Jason, showed her suggest that the FAA doesn't think it has the legal standing to win a case that doesn't involve reckless flight. And then you said, and I quote, I forget who actually you were quoting here, but it says some companies are doing things very openly that the FAA claims is very illegal, and they're not doing anything about it. It shows that the FAA has been doing 333s wrong all along. I forget who you quoted there.
That was Peter Sachs, who's the drone attorney in Connecticut, and he's like very outspoken on this sort of issue.
Yeah, no, I've been in the UAV legal group for a long time. I think since I'm pretty sure that's actually how I met you or ran into you in the Pittsburgh story. But he also was the person that received the 333 exemption for the paper airplane, correct?
Yeah, he did, which he said kind of exposed the whole thing as sort of a sham. Like, he got a 333 for a paper airplane, so how closely can the FAA be reading it? I don't know if I totally agree with that. He did jump through all of the hoops that they asked for. They should have probably thrown it out, but I don't know if it necessarily suggests they're not reading them. But in any case, the 333 program is pretty flawed. I think it's obvious.
Yeah, I think it is. Now, a couple questions for you. I mean, do you think that people... how do I say this? Do you think people should be allowed to fly drones commercially without a 333 exemption? That's my first question.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should. I think the safety aspect is a good one. I think that it's good that the FAA isn't going after people simply for flying commercially. If you're flying safe, I don't see why there's a problem. Flying commercially isn't inherently any different from flying, hobby. Like if you sell the video, that doesn't make you make it less safe inherently. So I think they should be able to, and I think that with the NPRM that we've seen, the upcoming regulations, you're not going to need a 333. You're not going to need special permission. So I think the FAA knows that, eventually they're going to have to let this go.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. You talked about the fact that these enforcement actions were for safety. Did you see any common themes in safety? Like specifically, people were flying over stadiums a majority of the time. What did you find?
So a few things, but I guess I'll first say it seems like most of these fines came along with either media attention or police involvement. So it seems like the FAA is often letting things slide unless someone notices. Like, there's a guy in Arlington, Texas, who landed his drone on the Cowboys Stadium and then tried to get it down with a second drone, and that was big news for a while, at least in Dallas, and I think I saw it, on a few tech sites. And there was video of him trying to get it down, so they grabbed the video off YouTube to say, here's the evidence, we're finding you. Sean Usman, I believe his name is, he was the guy who crashed at the White House. They threw the book at him. I mean, that was national news. That was a huge deal, not a good look. Turns out that he was a government employee, trying to impress a date, and was drunk when he did it. So,
but he was still only fined, what was it, like $5,500 or $5,500.
He was fined $5,500, but that's the most that any hobbyist has ever been fined. I mean, obviously you have the Skypan at $1.9 million, and who knows what's going to happen with that. And then the Zismo one is they settled for I think $5,000 or something. They ended up settling for much less than they were initially fined, which was $18,000. But yeah, I mean, basically what's happening here is the FAA only has a certain number of regulations that it can use, and they're maxed out at fining a person $1,100 per violation. So if you fly carelessly, recklessly in the middle of nowhere, the most they can fine you is $1,100. As far as I know. I mean, that's all they've tried so far. But if you fly in like Class B airspace or like have these other sort of violations that they like to use, they'll add another 1,100 on top of that. In Usman's case, he was flying in like the DC restricted flight zone. So they did that. They said, he was flying over the White House, which is like some sort of another sort of restriction there. And then careless, reckless, Class B airspace. And there was one other that they threw in there as well.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's that. There's also flying near and above people seems to be a problem. There was a weird one in Puerto Rico where two drones crashed into each other at a Hilton, and they ended up landing in the ocean. And that
sucks.
And so they allege that there was damage to the hotel property, and that's what they find them on. And I don't understand how that happened. I tried to reach both pilots and I couldn't. And I talked to people at the hotel, and they said that they definitely remember the case, but wouldn't, like, the person I need to speak to. Yeah, they wouldn't talk about it. And so I'm not sure what happened there, but they were flying over the ocean. They crashed into each other, landed in the ocean. I don't see why the FAA necessarily needs to get involved there.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me ask you this. Do you think that with this article coming out that the FAA has never fined anyone for flying commercially, do you think that's going to change the perception to people who want to buy drone footage or want to have drone footage shot? Do you think that's going to change their perception? Do you think maybe more operators will pop up out of this? I mean, what do you think the effect on the industry is going to be?
I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. There's been a few people saying, now the FAA is going to try to find someone for 333, but I don't think that's the case because, as Loretta said, they may not have legal authority to do that. There's no regulation. They're using this reckless flight regulation. And so I don't think that we're going to see like the FAA trying to make an example out of someone. But also I'm not sure how many clients are aware of FAA regulations and like know the minutia of it. And so
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm not a pilot myself. I've flown drones, but I don't do it commercially. So I'm not sure how many people are saying, oh, you don't have a 333. I'm not interested in working with you. And I'm also not sure how many people are still operating without them because it seems pretty easy to get one at this point. Although I know that there are people who are kind of like morally opposed to getting it. So, I mean, what do you think?
Well, a couple things. At the Interdrone conference in September, they did a survey of everyone who came in to the show. How many people have a 333? How many people are operating commercially? How many people seek to get a 333? Or how many people do not seek to get a 333 but will still operate commercially? People operating commercially was like 90% of the surveyed audience. And of those people, only 25% had a Section 333 exemption. And I forget, it was like around 65 or 75%, I don't remember exactly, stated that they were not seeking a 333 exemption and were still operating commercially. It was like, I remember I said 3 out of 4 pilots doesn't have one and is still operating. But, I went online and I saw that the FAA has given out 5,200 of these waivers. There was an article on AOPA which was by Jeff Antonelli, one of the big law firms that works with drone pilots, and he said 6 out of 7 people who asked him about getting a 333 exemption and filing one and having Jeff file a 333 for the client. 6 out of 7 pilots through the process just drop off and don't do anything more with the 333. I looked on YouTube to see how many drone videos there are, and that doesn't really give us a clue of how many commercial pilots there are, but there are 9,340,000 drone videos. Now, here's the thing that I see as the kicker as far as people flying drones commercially is this last year, as far as all the numbers I can gather, about 2.5 million drones were sold in the United States last year, and only 400,000 of them are registered in the U.S. airspace. And an argument that I've heard from a lot of people is that if I am flying drones commercially without a 333 exemption, there's no way I'm registering my drone because that just gives people more information to find me. And in speaking on that, our intern over here at Drone U had a question for you. Besides having another 333 operator call the FAA on you, how would they ever even find you? Because in your article, I believe that you said, Mr. Whitaker said that there are the number of companies flying illegally is too big to track.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, as you said, so many people are flying drones, and there are 24 enforcements on millions of people flying these things. So, I mean, the chances of you getting caught are exceedingly small, especially if you're flying safe. Sorry, what was the question?
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to hear that.
How do they find these? Yeah, so besides enforcements, they do have a lot of I guess inspectors send cease and desist orders and make phone calls to drone operators. And so
we've actually recorded some of those phone calls, and it would blow your mind and I'm sorry to interrupt, but it would blow your mind how different what these FSDO people say to different people. I've got one recording from Tennessee where a FSDO guy said, in order to operate as a 323, you do not need a pilot certificate or a valid pilot certificate. He said you could use a student certificate. Well, if I heard another phone call that was recorded out of Denver where the guy said the exact opposite thing. So we're hearing very different things from the same safety inspectors that are supposed to be part of the same agency.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that I think should be made clear, and I'm actually working on a follow-up. So that the FAA is such a patchwork right now of safety inspectors in different offices, and the regulations are so unclear that they're being enforced in a really weird way. And so, I ran this story, and some people on Reddit, which, who knows how informed they were like, well, the FAA told them not to do this, and then they did it again, and they got fined. And that's not an acceptable thing, because the FAA is telling people one thing and then doing another. The FAA has not been reliable. Like, they have not been reliably informing people what the actual rules are, because no one knows what the actual rules are. The FAA doesn't know what the actual rules are. And so it's very hard to say, oh, this guy shouldn't have been doing this thing, because there's thousands and thousands of other people doing the exact same thing and nothing is happening to them. And so it's just tough.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I think John Rupert said it best, and he said that the FAA has thrown out the ideas on how they can enforce it, what they want to enforce, but they're leaving it up to the courts to figure everything out. Because even with the John Taylor case, I feel like that's where the real snapback will come, or the switch track will come with the FAA. Essentially, once that court says, look, FAA, they said don't make any rules, do not promulgate any rules against model aircraft, and now you're having everyone register them, I feel like that's going to be the first slap on the wrist for them that says, look, you guys need to get your crap together, and you need to really figure out what's going to be legislation. But I feel that the secondary strategy by the FAA is, let's get 107 out, and then all this stuff will go away.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, just to go back and answer that one question is, they basically have people who check YouTube. They have people who, as you said, someone with a 333 will call on someone who doesn't have a 333. If you end up in the local newspaper in some way, shape, or form, the FAA will call you. I mean, even if you're doing everything entirely safe, if you get that media attention, which, I mean, I love people talking to me, but there's been so many local newspapers being like, oh, look, there's a drone operator in our town now, because that's an interesting story for a local newspaper. The FAA will see, does this person have a 333? And if they don't, they will call them and say, hey, you need one of these. And, even if that's not the case, that's how you sort of get on their radar, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with that radar.
Yeah. And whether being on that radar is a bad thing is totally up in the air, because, you can get all the calls in the world from the FAA and it's a nuisance, but is anything going to happen to you? Who knows? Like, probably not.
I would say so far, no. Nothing will happen.
Right,
So,
right.
and that what happened with me is I flew an event for a fallen officer. There was an officer in Rio Rancho who had been shot. He had like 5 kids, and he died. And they had a big funeral and commencement ceremony for him. And the city asked us to shoot it, and we did. We did it for free as like a here's to the family, you know. And we had an area set up to fly outside of the building, and did it as safe as we possibly could. Oh, and I still got 3 letters, multiple phone calls, and it was like, well, look, I didn't even do this for money, and they didn't care. So I think it's very interesting. And anyway, I just wanted to let you know that a lot of the things that you're saying are correct from experience. So I don't really want that to get out, but I don't mind telling everyone that that has happened, which it has. And they will pester you with emails and phone calls. And my favorite, Jason, is that when they send you the certified letter, so that it's supposed to look really legit, and like, oh, we're sending you certified mail, that means you got to answer, when if you look at the Pilot Bill of Rights, you do not have to answer them. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover? I just have to say, overall, I loved your article, man. And it really goes to show, again, validates what we've been saying here at Drone U for a long time. And anyway, anything that we missed here, bud?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on, and I'm sure that everyone listening knows this already, and we sort of talked about it. But I think one thing to just remember is that drones sort of blindsided the FAA, and they did not know what to do with them. And that's so clear from all of their actions, and they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and are trying to play catch up in a way that is frustrating for hobbyists. It's frustrating for commercial operators, and I think that basically they're trying to play a PR game until they have the actual regulations in place. And so what they're doing is, if we say something's illegal enough times, maybe we can stop people from doing it, even if it's not. If we say, you have to register your drone, people will fly them a little bit less recklessly, even if this eventually gets struck down in court. It's just sort of like, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with the Taylor case, but it's just they're kind of playing defense as best as they can until they have some sort of structure set up, and it's really frustrating for everyone involved, I'm sure. And so I guess I just hope they get their act together eventually and come out with something that is clear and makes sense and is is done in a fair way, like a way that's not arbitrary, because there's so many people who are doing this and getting in trouble for it, and there's people who are doing the same thing and nothing's happening, and it'd be nice to just have some like level playing field, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think we all want clear rules. I think we all want an easy barrier to entry. Having to get a pilot's license to fly a drone makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So I think we're all on the same page. Thank you for laying this out. Thank you for taking the time to do the Freedom of Information Act to figure out the real truth behind this. And I think you couldn't have said it better. They're throwing things at the wall and trying to figure out what sticks. So I think it's good that, we have a very tech-savvy industry as far as, the audience really behind drones. I know on Reddit and I know on some Facebook groups, there's a lot of people who we say ignorance is bliss. But I do feel that a majority of this audience is very well educated. And I think that's why you're seeing the story that the FAA is telling doesn't match, the numbers that are coming out from the manufacturers. And I think that's also why the manufacturers made their own alliance recently. You're seeing a whole new set of associations to protect the rights of drone pilots. The AMA for the longest time said, we'll protect you with our insurance. We'll do this, we'll do that. They haven't done anything, at least that we have found out in the Taylor case. They haven't done anything to really protect the rights of registration or model aircraft. So I think this does a huge number for the industry. I think this really represents and tells the truth of what's been going on, and it's just awesome that it's out there. So Jason, one of the other articles that you had put out was the fact that someone had actually lost their pilot's license for flying a drone. So my question to you is if nothing will happen to you as a hobbyist for not getting a 333, do you think it's actually more dangerous or more liability as a business owner to go out and get your pilot's license and get a 333? I mean, what do you think about this?
Right. So I'm not a lawyer, so this is obviously not legal advice. But I mean, thus far, the FAA has shown no interest or ability to prosecute people for not having a 333 or go after them. So you're talking about doing something that will, A, take a long time, B, cost money if you go through a lawyer to get it, and C, when you sign up for a 333, I've heard this legal argument. I do not know if it's actually the case, but by submitting a 333, you're agreeing to fly, in sort of specific types of circumstances, like you're not supposed to fly at night and things like that. And I've heard that by agreeing to do that, you are opening yourself up to potential prosecution from the FAA if you violate it, because you're specifically agreeing to do what they said. Whereas, if you're just flying commercially without one, you're flying without any regulations at all. So I've heard that argument. It makes sense to me. I don't know if it would hold up in court. So from that standpoint, I don't see a reason to get a 333 unless it makes your clients,
happy,
feel more comfortable. And then, so there's a guy in Coney Island who got his manned pilot's license taken away for 3 months for basically flying near or above people in over the hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July. Don't know the facts of the case totally, because I spoke to the pilot and I spoke to the FAA. It's sort of like a he said she said sort of situation. So until we see a video, and I'm working on getting a video, we're not sure what he did. But in any case, if you violate 333 or if you kind of don't fly as the FAA likes, you can get your pilot's license taken away, which is a huge, detractor. It's not a great thing to have happen to you, especially if you do want a future in manned aviation, which I don't think too many drone operators do. But, if you do want to work in manned aviation and you get your license suspended, it's like a very bad thing. You become essentially unemployable from what I've heard. So, I don't see why. If I were a drone business, I would not get a 333.
Wow. Well, on that bombshell, guys, that's going to do it for us for the show. Jason, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for taking the time to do these articles. I know Motherboard probably pays you for it, but I'm saying thank you from just the passion of being a drone pilot. We all really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll say I'm waiting on other FOIAs, so hopefully there'll be more to share soon. Who knows when I'll get them, but, working on it. So
awesome. Well, I look forward to having you back on the show to talk about that.
Cool. All right. Have a good one.
You as well. Guys, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks again for listening. If you have a question, go to askdroneu.com and upload that question. I think this podcast is going to give you a few things to think about. If you have comments, let us know on Facebook, facebook.com/droneu. That's going to do it for us today, guys. We'll see you next time.
We believe that videos, images, words, and sounds have the absolute power to inform, inspire, and entertain. We reject indecision, confusion, and vanity, for they work against the community. We are united under the virtues of safety and knowledge. We are a training community of learners and teachers who encourage and energize each other to achieve greatness. We are pilots, videographers, photographers, freelancers, business owners, enthusiasts, experts, and apprentices. We are creators. We are the Drone U.